Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Liverpool Football Club, the roller coaster of a season that Liverpool have endured this campaign. What has gone wrong? Why is it so bad? Why is it incredibly frustrating right now for Liverpool fans such as myself? And everything along those lines is what we're going to be discussing here today in this video. But before we go any further, I would like to remind you all to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both things always would be greatly appreciated. But for now, let's get into the video, because like I say, this is a video that I don't ever want to kind of produce. I want to only be talking about good things with Liverpool, as I have been doing for a number of years now. But of course, this season has taken a complete nosedive. It's been a complete car crash. It's been a train wreck. It's been a season in which has had very few bright moments and a lot of annoying, frustrating ones. And it's just simply put not been good enough. It's simply not been good enough. And as a fan of Liverpool, I always try and see the positives in it. I always try and see the bright side in it. I try and see that, you know, Liverpool are looking to try and evolve. Liverpool are trying to look at different ways to play, bringing in a couple of different types of players, looking at maybe trying to sort of slightly rebuild again and go again in a year or two's time. But Liverpool's plan has always been long-term planning, and rather than going for the short term, which in hindsight now you can say maybe if they'd looked more short term, if they'd more looked in the present, maybe they wouldn't have to be doing this right now. Because whilst they were on top, whilst they were winning the Champions League and the Premier League, if they'd have put more effort into building, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation right now. And obviously that is definitely something that should be considered when talking about Liverpool's issues right now, and obviously how Liverpool should have probably acted a few years ago. And that's where the main issue stands with FSG, and we'll come on to FSG later on in the video because it's a big bulk of the issues that obviously Liverpool are having right now. But everybody needs to take responsibility. The players, the staff, manager, and of course the board all need to take responsibility for what is happening this season. Like I say, it's been an up and down season, more downs than ups, I grant you. But you know, take the past few weeks alone. Beating Manchester City, arguably the best team in the world right now, beating Manchester City in what was incredible fashion, to a man. Every single one of those players that played on that day was incredible. Played very well. Tactics were slightly modified. It was an incredible victory. It was a top quality performance. Against West Ham, it wasn't pretty at times, but they got the job done. It was another 3 points, and you thought that maybe Liverpool's season could start to turn around. And then to lose back-to-back games in the Premier League to relegation-threatened Nottingham Forest, who hadn't won in their past several games. And then to Leeds, who before last night hadn't won in their past 8 games, is abysmal. It's embarrassing. It is incredibly frustrating, and it is very, very stupid. Now I get that one-off games can happen. If that Forest game was a one-off game, I could live with that. But it's not a one-off game. This has been happening all season. This is happening from the start. Drawing to Fulham, drawing to Crystal Palace, losing to Manchester United. Things like that have happened all season, and it is not any more of an isolated incident. It is a genuine thing. It is genuinely happening. It is genuinely so frustrating to see and hear it all unfold before our very eyes. And that's just how bad it is right now. And like I say, last night was just the icing on the cake, because it's happening, the same kind of things are happening game after game. Liverpool are creating chances and they look like they're in control, but on the counter-attack, they're terrified. The defence is terrified. The midfield is non-existent. Every time on the counter-attack that an opposition team goes forward, they look like they're going to score every time. It's happened constantly throughout the season. And last night, like I said, was no different. It looked like Liverpool were in control, especially in the second half. The Leeds goalkeeper was having a very, very good game, which is kind of typical kind of fashion for most goalkeepers that come against Liverpool. Like we saw with Dean Henderson the previous week, and we've seen with other goalkeepers, Jordan Pickford, for example, of Everton in that goalless draw. And then they get hit with a sucker punch. They get hit, and Liverpool falter. They crumble. They fail. And last night was even more costly because last night was a home game. Last night was the end of Virgil van Dijk's 5-year run, undefeated, playing for Liverpool at Anfield, and obviously, like I say, being undefeated there. It's just not good enough, and the players need to take responsibility for that. The players in certain areas, there have been obviously a few exceptions, but players in certain areas obviously need to take exception for that. I think apart from Alisson, who definitely doesn't deserve any kind of hate towards him or anything, he's actually been probably our player of the season. He's stood out well, and I think Liverpool's situation would be a lot worse had he not been in the side. I think apart from him, maybe the rotation of Tsimikas and Robertson, I think they've been okay in that back four, the only ones that can really hold their head high in that back four position. I think you can also look at Harvey Elliott, who's also been a standout. Maybe Thiago when he's been fit to an extent. I think Luis Diaz was doing alright before obviously he got injured. And I think Bobby Firmino's output this season has obviously helped an incredible amount, and it looked like for a time that he was starting to find a bit of form back. It's just a shame that everybody else has kind of crumbled. Salah's obviously been chipping in with a few goals here and there. Nunez has been hit and miss. The rest of them, though, that we know, have all crumbled. And it's more in that midfield area. Like I say, it's in that midfield area that's a particularly weak spot right now, and I think that's been a bit of a strength of Liverpool's for a while. The industrial side of the game, the high work rate and everything, but it's just not there anymore. Henderson looks completely off it. When he's playing things simple, he's good, but he looks off it. He looks off it in terms of mentally. He looks off it in terms physically. He just looks off it. Milner's been asked to play in about 5 different positions every game. I get that, but he's not a long-term answer. Of course he's not. Fabinho currently right now is going through some sort of weird Freaky Friday Space Jam experience in which he's not himself. I don't get how someone who only like a year ago was being called by many as one of the best defensive midfielders currently playing in the game has gone from that pinnacle of standard of performances to now not being any better than Scott McTominay. Scott McTominay is actually better than this guy. Like, what has gone wrong in his life with his confidence to be completely shattered the way it is, and for him to be playing like this, where his standards have completely dropped? It is absolutely baffling to me, and it's ridiculous, and I don't understand where the player that was so good at breaking up play, was so good at moving the ball and shifting the ball forward quickly, was so good at pressing and winning the ball back. I don't know where that player has gone. I genuinely don't. Curtis Jones, look, I know that there is a player in there somewhere, but I've not seen much improvement from him in the past 4 years that I've seen him. I want to keep giving him another chance, of course I do, but you know, his injuries are also starting to take a bit of a hold, and I feel a little bit sorry for him for that. But to me, there's been very little improvement from him. I think he's on borrowed time a little bit from a lot of fans, including myself. Naby Keita, glass cannon. The only player apart from Thiago in that midfield that I think is different to the rest in terms of his creativity and his pressing and everything. But he's never available. Oxlade-Chamberlain again, another one. Never really available. I think he's back ready and fit now, and I think he'll probably be ready to play for a couple of weeks. But then he'll get injured again, of course he will. It's Oxlade-Chamberlain. But it is what it is. And the defence as well. Trent's not been on it. Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip's been in and out with injury. But Gomez and Van Dijk have just... Gomez looks good in moments, and then he'll do something stupid in the next moment. He gave away the goal last night against Leeds. He gave away the goal last week, or he gave away the free kick that led to the goal last week against Forest. He'll look, but he played excellent against Manchester City. I don't understand it. He was excellent against Manchester City, but this season he's been completely hit and miss. Van Dijk looks like he's low on confidence, even for a guy of his confident stature and how we perceive him to be for the past few years. Players need to take responsibility. As I say, the likes of Alisson definitely do not deserve this. He's been excellent this season, and he does not deserve it. Klopp needs to take some responsibility as well. Some of his substitutions, some of his team selections have been baffling at times. I know that all managers have that, and I know that Klopp's obviously had that in his Liverpool career as well at times, but some of them this season, and I get that some of them have been obviously with his hands tied behind his back, so to speak, with the amount of injuries and a couple of suspensions here and there that have obviously happened. But sometimes his decision making when it comes to the starting 11 with certain games this season has been questionable. Sometimes his substitutions in terms of that midfield area again specifically has been questionable. Just strange from Klopp. But obviously, like I say, the main issue's been FSG not strengthening properly when we were on top of our game, not fully backing the manager to the full extent that they could, not going that extra mile in the transfer market and strengthening players, strengthening areas of the squad when they could. It's just not been good enough from them. And, you know, I've been one of these people that have admittedly held back a little bit. I've kind of gone with the trusting of the process, trusting Jurgen Klopp's judgment, trusting the staff and the players to bring in players, these gems that you can pick up for not like the 80, 90, 60, 70 odd million or whatever, but the 30 to 40 million pound mark at most, like we have done constantly, like we've done with Salah, like we did with Sadio Mane, like we did with Firmino, like we've done with Diaz, and so on and so forth, and only reaching to 50 when it's obviously a big name player like your Fabinho when he was obviously very good, going that little bit extra mile for your Van Dijks and your Alissons and stuff. I get that. But in hindsight, it's just like I say, it's not been good enough. And I've trusted the process, like I say, with that. And now I'm starting to see that they didn't do enough. Definitely didn't do enough, and it was. People were right. It was always going to be a losing battle in the end. Unless they constantly invested, unless they constantly freed the funds up to compete properly. This team has been competing at 100 mile an hour with Manchester City, the best team in the world for the past few years. A little bit of extra funding here and there might have tipped the scales in Liverpool's favour for a couple of those times in the past few years. And now you're seeing that they're absolutely shot to pieces. Mentally, physically, that squad, for the most part, especially in the industrial area where the midfield are very similar to each other. They're not flashy, most of them. They're not skillful. They're not tricky. They're not flair type players. They're not blessed with great pace or anything like that. They're just industrial players that work hard constantly. They're absolutely shot to pieces. And a large part of it is down to the lack of investment and everything that goes along with that from the club, and I just don't get it anymore. I just really don't get it no more, and I don't get why they didn't see the problem. It was baffling to me that we didn't go for a midfielder as obviously the pre-season drew on. Like I say, I trusted Klopp to begin with. I trusted the process to begin with. I trusted FSG to begin with, but I always kept an eye on them. Baffling to me that we didn't go for one towards the end of the transfer market completely. A permanent one, an excellent one, a reliable one, because obviously the injuries were piling up. It didn't happen. Instead, they decided to try and solve their injury crisis midfield by bringing in a injury-prone midfielder. How does that work? How is that a solution to that problem? I don't know. Klopp, for me, has got enough credit in the bank. Like, yes, I can criticise some of his team selections, I can criticise some of his substitutions, but to me, he's got enough credit in the bank for what he's done over the past several years with this club, and the World Cup break can't come soon enough, because I think that will be an excellent point for Klopp to go away, refresh, and look at maybe how Liverpool attack the rest of this season. It's not completely gone, of course not. The Champions League's still there, and obviously stranger things have happened where teams have gone on to win the Champions League from having poor domestic seasons. Liverpool did it themselves in 2005. So it's not completely gone, it's not completely dead in the water right now for Liverpool. There is still a shred of hope of salvaging what is becoming a real train wreck of a season. But like I say, it's going to take some serious looking at. And FSG really do need to pull their finger out in January, and they really do need to really shake things up and really get the fans back on side, because they're turning. I think a lot of them have been like me, and I think a lot of them have trusted the process because obviously things have been good. We kind of trusted Klopp a little bit. We kind of understood that we needed to kind of build back up again. We were chasing the things in stages. We were chasing being back in the Champions League within the top four. We were chasing competing, and then we were chasing actually going on to become champions of Europe, champions of England. And now that obviously we've achieved them goals, it was all about maintaining them. And that's different. It's different from when you're trying to maintain your stance at the pinnacle rather than chasing the pinnacle. And with that changing, obviously, it means that the club's way of thinking and way of running should have changed as well. But it hasn't. And like I said, I think a lot of people were like me. They kind of saw that and they kind of understood it at first to begin with, that obviously they needed to try and rectify some of the mistakes of the past. They needed to try and be realistic in terms of their ambitions, in terms of the players they could sign and everything. But obviously not now, but a couple of years ago, the time for change should have happened then, and it didn't. And now we're back to square one again. We're lying in mid-table. I don't think we'll go any lower, but let's face it, I thought we'd beat Forest and Leeds, and that obviously didn't happen. So if things don't go any better, I will be then even more worried. But I don't think. But obviously, the league is what it is. Focus on the Champions League. That would be my kind of aim, because it don't look good right now, the league. And as I say, I think a lot of people were like me. They trusted the process to begin with. They trusted the kind of stage building that Liverpool were going in, and then they wanted more, and we deserved more. We demanded more, and we didn't get it. And now we're having to play catch up yet again. We're having to rebuild again, and it's whatever's down to Klopp. And like I say, you can't go and beat Man City the way that we did and have the side be named dead in the water, because it's not dead in the water. It's not. It's proof it is. I think there needs to be some compromise in all areas. I think the players need to book up their ideas. I think Klopp needs to continue to tweak things a little bit. tweak things just to get the best out of certain players, tweak things to get the best out of the results, go back to basics a little bit, similar to how we did a few years ago in that massive injury hit season, in which obviously things weren't great then, and then we turned things around towards the end of the campaign and we still managed to finish third. And I think FSG need to pull their finger out a bit more. I think FSG need to obviously go that extra mile, and for me, January can't come soon enough, because this team, like I say, midfield wise, definitely. Not so much. I think obviously they could add more strength and depth in terms of the strike force, and I think the defence is on paper okay, but for me, that midfield, it just needs completely ripping out and starting again. It really does. Like, the industrial players are shot to pieces. Lack of creativity, lack of ideas, just a lack of everything that made this midfield great to begin with. And like I say, I'm pretty much extremely frustrated, annoyed. It's not good. It's not good at all for this club. It's not good enough, and these players, this manager and FSG really need to look up their ideas. But those are just the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, ramblings, whatever you want to call it of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of Liverpool's season so far this campaign, and how shocking it's been? Do leave your own thoughts, your comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it, down below on this particular topic in the comment section, because I'm sure it'll make for interesting reading. Or your thoughts on the season so far, your thoughts going forward, what needs to happen, what do you think could happen to the club, to the manager, to the players, to the owners, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure it'll all make for interesting reading down below in the comment section. Otherwise, hit the like button on the way up, enjoy the video, subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Both things always going to be very much appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch, this has been another Fletch Talks video, and I will see you all again soon in another video.